succeed. Have faith of a mustard seed. Get up on your feet, rise up.
Welcome to another segment of the Drexwell SEMA show, where we encourage you to rise up and take your position. Today I have Dr. Slattery. In fact, when I moved to Providenciales, I think it was in 91 I moved to Provo. I don't remember when I first went to the doctor, but he was the first medical doctor I met here in Providenciales, and he's been my doctor since then. But Dr. Slattery has now released a book called the Body Cooperative, and we want to talk about this book because it's a very informative book. It's not just about health, it's about your mind. You'll hear more about it as we get into the conversation. So I encourage you to watch this video and be better informed how we can change our lifestyle, how we can change our diet, and how we can be better, productive citizens here in the world, actually. Not just Turks and Caicos, throughout the world, because this is going to be seen throughout the world. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Sam Slattery. Dr. Slattery, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drexwell. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here, actually. Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad to have you. Tell us about yourself, Dr. Slattery.
So I was born in Sheffield in the UK. My parents were interesting people. My father was one of the UK's first industrial physicians.
Oh.
So one of three doctors who essentially started a profession which is now known as occupational health, and their primary concern was the health and well-being of the labour force, and they showed companies and employers that it was really important to take care of their workforce and how best to protect them not only from injury and ill health at work, but how to help them be healthy. And we then showed very clearly that they're more productive if you take care of individuals and in a respectful fashion and address their health needs. So that was my father. My mother was sort of an interesting person too. Her father was a veterinary surgeon and a physician.
Okay.
He worked in West Africa, in Nigeria, for most of his career. And he infused in her the love of animals and horses. She trained as a physical therapist, a human physical therapist at St Thomas's Hospital in London, which is where my father trained. They met there, got married, and then as she moved through her life, interestingly enough, she had a quite distinguished career as a physical therapist in the human sphere. She then took all of that training and took it into the equine and canine world and basically started physical therapy and sports therapy for horses and dogs. So I came from a sort of fairly interesting background. Yes. They didn't actually like each other that much, and so they split up when I was 11, and that's relevant to my life story. And then I sort of moved around following one or other of them, primarily my mother. That exposed me to different parts of the world and different parts of the UK. I also then followed them both to St Thomas's Hospital. I didn't want to be a doctor, actually. I wanted to be a biologist. I was much more interested in ecology. Yeah, I was very interested in ecology, and I'm still very interested in ecology, and part of the book's based on that idea and my knowledge about ecosystems. Anyway, but as it happens, I was the chosen one to go to medical school, so I went. And since then, I sort of charted my own career, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do because at the early days I was sort of unsettled in medicine, but I knew I didn't really want to be in hospital medicine mainstream in the UK. So I started training in different branches of medicine, and then by hook or by crook, I ended up here in the Turks and Caicos Islands, which was really supposed to be for a few months. Yeah, then it sort of turned into, well, we'll stay. My wife and I said we'd stay for 3 years. Our children one of them was born here, the other was born in the UK, but my wife was originally pregnant, then we came back here. When he was very young and settled, but there we go, 35 years later, I'm still here. And run Grace Bay Medical Centre, and I've evolved through the years from being a very general doctor / surgeon / obstetrician / everything in a small community of what was then probably 3,500 people. We had to take care of everything. And as my career evolved, I became increasingly interested in people from a holistic and ecological point of view. And so that's how we ended up with the book. In the middle of all that, I actually drove myself into ill health. So I became very ill, actually, in my
I didn't know that.
40s. Yeah, very ill indeed. And so my own journey as part of the book is what pushed me into trying to figure out how to be healthy and well, because I knew how to treat sick people, but actually I needed to figure out how to become healthy myself, and doctors didn't seem to be fixing me. So that sent me back on what is now a 15-year journey. I went back to school. I got a couple of master's degrees. I did a lot of study, did a lot of research, and I really went into the ecology of the human body, and that's where we are.
Okay. Wow, that's very impressive. And I'm glad you made the Turks and Caicos Islands your home. So you wrote the book, and it's based on your many years of experience in the medical field, and also your personal journey, as you just mentioned. So tell us about the book. You call it the Body Cooperative?
Yep.
Okay, why you came up with that name?
Okay, so the first sort of piece of interesting information, which some people find difficult to wrap their head around, and some people might even find offensive, is that we're not actually entirely human.
Oh.
So we're much more like the coral reef out there, out of the window, outside this window, or a tropical rainforest. The human body is actually made up of a multitude of different organisms. Our human cells probably only make up about a third of the box. So we're an interesting meta-organism. And what I mean by that is that the human body is made up from human cells, but it's also made up from a very large colony of bacteria, which outnumbers us genetically, certainly far more genetic code in the bacterial colony than us by a factor of probably 1,000, certainly 100. A lot of viruses, a lot of other animals sort of live in and on us, creatures, parasites, and all sorts of things. So we're more like the ecosystem I sort of referred to in my introduction about myself, which is sort of intriguing to me. And for this ecosystem to work, everybody in there has to cooperate with everybody else. And in fact, yeah,
So it can't work by itself. It has to be.
Yeah, no. So there's no single part of the human body, no single cell can operate without all the other parts.
Got it.
And that the other parts not just being other cells, but other cells as in bacteria or viruses. So like any ecosystem on the planet where you've got lots of different species all living together, it only thrives if everything's in balance and if everything in there is cooperative. And indeed, if you which is a different way of thinking about things, because a lot of people, if you talk to them about evolution, they'll refer to Darwin, and then the next thing that they speak to is they go, well, yes, it's about the survival of the fittest, and that's completely wrong, and it's a complete misconception. If you actually read some of Darwin's later essays, and if you actually think about it and understand how ecology works, it's actually survival of the cooperators. And successful systems in our world are based on cooperative behavior, not survival of the fittest. Does that make sense? So,
Makes sense.
and we all know that the team is as good as the weakest link, and we all know that a soccer team is as good as the weakest player. And you can have the best football player in the world on your team, but you're still going to lose to other teams that play in a cooperative fashion. They may all be very mediocre players, but they all play very well together. So you're going to get beaten with your superstar. And that's true in a biological system as well, and it's true for us. So it's about cooperative behavior, and it's about assisting different parts of the body, assisting other parts of the body. So that's where the name came from.
So that makes sense now.
Yeah.
I got it. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So tell us in the book, tell us about it. I know early to the show, you mentioned about 5 areas
Yeah.
that we need to ensure that we are healthy, productive citizens.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So the book was originally, when I first conceived it, when I thought about what it meant to be healthy, what components of our life you needed to address to be healthy, there were 4 actually.
4.
But there is 5 chapters, and I talk about the 5 elements, so I'll talk about the 5th in a second. The first is diet. You are what you eat. Absolutely. And the reason for that is because what you eat has a profound influence on the bacterial colony that lives in our intestine. And this bacterial colony, I would be as bold as say, runs us. That's probably maybe one step too far, but it has a massive influence on how the rest of the meta-organism, the rest of the species operate. And you can modify that colony through diet. So if you have a poor diet, you're going to have a colony that's not beneficial to the rest of the organism.
Okay.
And if you have a healthy diet, then you'll have a colony that is. And this is all run through the next level, which is the nervous system and the immune system, most of which resides in the wall of your intestine. So what most people don't know is that 85% of all the immune cells in your body live in the wall of your intestine. And the liver, which in my world, in the world of gastroenterology, we include the liver in the gut. So I would say that 85% of your immune cells live in the gut. So that's clearly the majority of your immune system. The other thing is that we have more nerve tissue cells, more neurons in your intestine than there are in your spinal cord. So most people know there's a lot of nerves in their spinal cord, but so they'd be surprised to know that there are more nerves in your intestine.
Wow.
And it's very complex, and it acts like the brain, and it is a second brain. Some of us would argue it's actually the first brain. So the gut wall is the home of our neuroimmune system, which is heavily manipulated by the bacterial colony in your gut. So that's the diet link, and that neuroimmune system and the bacterial colony that influences it has a profound influence on the way your brain operates and the rest of the immune system in the body. So diet influences your body.
So
keep it simple.
Very, very.
It's absolutely, it's number one. It's number one. And unfortunately, the world's health is continuing to
deteriorate.
Absolutely. And it's all dietary related. So we can talk in a minute if you want a little bit more about that,
Yes,
what parts of it is the problem. The second is exercise. We're a machine, and we need to move at least. So exercise is directed movement and with the intent of making you fitter or stronger. Movement is just movement. We move less and less as society modernizes. We sit in offices, which is considered to be, if you sit at a desk, as you and I do most of the day, it's considered to be equivalent to smoking a packet of cigarettes a day.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's that detrimental to your health. So there's a lot of encouragement to get people out of desks, standing desks, get up from your desk, have an alarm that gets you to move every 15 minutes and walk somewhere else in the office to break that sedentary behavior. A lot of people sit around at home and watch television. So we become increasingly sedentary in our day-to-day lives. We don't walk anywhere anymore. We get in a car. We even drive our car to the gym. And I have to say to people who go to the gym, I think that's great if you enjoy the company for strength training. There are lots of reasons to go to the gym. Don't hate on me, gym owners. But actually, you'd probably get as much benefit from walking to the same gym if it's 5 miles away and home again without ever stepping through the door. So I'm a big fan of walking.
So
and
walking is very...
It's massive. And if you think about it, it's how we evolved.
Yeah.
That's how humans evolved over a very long period of time to walk. We're not bad at jogging, but not all individuals are good, and you definitely need to start as a child. So jogging produces quite a lot of injuries. Again, please don't hate on me, joggers and runners.
Oh, that's okay.
It's fine, but I think you definitely need to know what you're doing, and you need to break into it slowly. So quite a lot of people hurt themselves. But walking is what we're designed to do. We're extremely efficient at it, and it's very good for you.
And how much walking? I know you mentioned the 5 miles.
Yeah, it varies. 10,000 steps is the magic number that gets pushed around. It actually...
Every day?
Yes, yeah. And so a lot of people now have apps on their iPhones and their watches and all sorts of other things. apps that will tell them how many steps they've taken today, and I think that's not a bad idea to have some sense of how far you walk. The 10,000, interestingly, and from a historical point of view, actually comes out of Japan. It was a figure that was pulled out of the air by some Japanese scientists, and it was the Japanese government. It was to do with the Japanese Olympics. But actually, funny enough, it turns out it's probably about right. So you want to do about 10,000 a day. I try and walk, it varies. I mean, I go through phases in life like we all do. So currently I'm trying to hit 6 miles a day for a sustained 30 days and see what that does to me. So I walk, I'm blessed because there's Grace Bay Beach out there. So every day I walk is about 15,000 steps I've been doing. But a little bit more, I did nearly 20 the other day.
That is great. That's good information.
So walking, just go walk somewhere. And it doesn't have to be special walking, just go for a walk. And the more you walk, the better. There was a paper published a few years ago that suggested that if you walk 10 miles a day, you'd never be a diabetic or have high blood pressure. I think there's some evidence to suggest that's probably correct.
Because where I work, there's an elevator. And so what I do, I use the elevator to go up.
Yeah.
Then I walk downstairs. But if I'm going to just use the steps.
Yeah, and I talk about that in the book. Just and that's how you So what happened was, if you think about here, your own grandparents and the way they lived, firstly they walked everywhere. They went to a farm. They did some manual labor. It wasn't particularly heavy, but it wasn't light work either. They paced it out during the course of the day. They moved every part of their body. They used the muscles in every part of their body. They went home. They cooked and they slept. So movement, if you want, exercise, was part of everyday life. It's just what we did. And as we become increasingly mechanized, we've now made exercise a thing, whereas it used to just be what we did. So what you want to try and do is to be healthy is to try and reintroduce movement back into your life as much as possible. And that could be going to the gym, being in a sports team, but those to me are recreational hobbies. They're not necessarily what you need to do to be healthy. Just walking up 2 flights of stairs is a great start. Walking to the shops, walking to the gym, walking to see your friends rather than driving, getting out of a car. So that's exercise. There are many different forms of specific exercise, and I talk about them in the book, about some benefits. I'm a big fan of yoga. There's reasons for that. I'm a big fan of swimming. I'm a big fan of cycling. They're all non-weight bearing, but it doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is you do something that you enjoy.
Movement.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the second element, critical, and it's not just about being fit. Movement and exercise has a profound effect on your bacterial colony in your gut, the neuroimmune system in the gut wall, and therefore the overall balance of the neuroimmune system throughout your body. And since the neuroimmune system influences your brain, it has a profound effect on the way your brain works. And in fact, we know now that exercise is a better antidepressant than antidepressant pills. So you're better off going for a 6-mile walk every day.
Exercise is better than the
Taking exercise is a better antidepressant than taking an antidepressant pill. Yeah. So those are people who are unwell.
Right.
But if you don't want to become unwell, because the book's as much about health as it is about illness, back to what I said in my introduction, there are 2 different things. There is sickness and there's health. And we're talking about health here. Sickness is when all this has failed and you become unwell. And that's what doctors specialize in, sickness. They don't necessarily specialize in health. Most of them don't know much about it. Okay, so that's exercise, and then I mentioned in there sleep. So this is the third element. And over the last 10 years, we've really begun to understand the importance of sleep. It's not an optional extra. It's the lazy person's way of getting healthy. Just go to bed earlier and get some more of it. Unfortunately, we're going completely the opposite direction. We're getting less and less.
We are.
This also has a profound effect on your neuroimmune system, a profound effect on the way the brain operates, and is a leading cause of ill health these days. So now we've got a population that's eating bad, not such healthy food and too much of it, way too much sugar, a population that is becoming increasingly sedentary and uses mechanical means to get around. don't use their body to do things on a day-to-day basis because machines do it for us. A population that's sleeping less and less, and the evidence is clear that is the case, particularly young people with increasing use of electronic devices. The last
So how many hours of sleep we need?
So it varies from individual to individual. About 7
hours,
seems to be the
minimum.
average. Yeah. The other thing, and I wrote a blog about it on the website for my book the other day, that it doesn't have to be continuous sleep. In fact, we probably never did sleep continuously. If you look at traditional people, and as we were talking before the show started, I'm doing work back again in Africa where most people don't have access to electricity, certainly where I'm working in Malawi. So they tend to go to bed after they've eaten an evening meal, and so as the embers die in the charcoal fire where they've been cooking, everybody goes to bed. They've eaten, they go to bed. So they tend to sleep probably 5 or 6 hours. So, about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock they wake up. Then they're often awake for 2 or 3 hours, and then they drop off back to sleep, and then they'll sleep the balance until pre-dawn, and then they'll wake up. So this is the concept of 2 sleeps. And this is probably how humans evolved. There's certainly plenty of evidence that that's the case in Roman literature, many, where we have a written record. So I don't think it matters how you sleep. And I only mention that because a lot of people come to me and they're worried that they wake up in the middle of the night. And I go, well, as long as you're getting your 7 hours, that's fine. In fact, you can get up if you want and go and potter around for an hour, read a book or do something. Just don't turn on the television. That's not a good idea. And there's reasons for that. So about 7 hours, but it varies, and I've noticed over the last few years, as I get a little bit older, I've gone from 7 to 6.5, and that seems to work very well for me. How do you measure it? Throw out your alarm clock and wake up naturally in the morning. So just keep moving the time you go to bed and sleep earlier and earlier until you find you're waking up at the time you need to wake up. And then you'll find your own natural rhythm.
Okay.
So that's sleep. The fourth element is strain. Okay,
What?
strain. So strain is an engineering concept. If you stress something, if you place a stress on something, you then create strain. So life is stressful, that's just a fact. Okay, there's no escaping it. None of us can escape it, as much as a lot of us spend a lot of our lives trying to escape it. A stressor in itself, and there's a whole conversation we could have about that, because our expectations are that life shouldn't be stressful, and then we get really stressed out because it is stressful, and then we spend a lot of time trying to make it unstressful, and we become even more stressed about it. And so we build this sort of crazy self-created stress that's already added onto something that's inherently stressful. So that produces strain on the neuroimmune system, and then that strain then starts to cause a sort of, if you want, an unbalance within the system, and then this is what leads to ill health.
Wow.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So it's not actually stress that kills us. A lot of people say, well, stress kills us. I would say no. It's how you manage stress. In other words, how do you engineer your life?
Because we're going to face stress anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. How do you engineer your life to manage the strain it puts on your body? Some of it, of course, is to live a healthy lifestyle by eating the right food, taking some exercise and moving around, getting adequate sleep. So that diminishes the effect of stress on our body.
Yeah.
It helps balance and build a robust neuroimmune system. That in itself is a protection, will therefore mitigate against the strain.
Yeah.
And so I talk about stress and strain as the fourth one. So I talk about stress management, diminishing the effect of normal life on the neuroimmune system, diminishing the strain placed on the body. And just like an engineer can build a bridge and engineer into a bridge to withstand day-to-day traffic, the occasional storm and the odd hurricane, you can do exactly the same for yourself by having a healthy lifestyle.
So a lot of people, though, they worry a lot.
Yep.
And they worry about simple things. They worry about tomorrow. They worry about uncertainty.
Yep.
And they worry about things that they cannot change.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us have to reach a point in our lives where we have to face the fact that worrying is not going to solve the problem.
Correct.
And I think that could add stress in your life. Because
Absolutely.
what's,
Yeah.
you know,
Correct.
it's not going to solve anything.
Correct. Correct.
And all the thing it's going to do is create issues for your health.
Absolutely, because you're at. So I come from a Buddhist background, although I was raised a Christian. When I was 18, I became if you want, I entered into the world of Buddhist philosophy.
Okay.
I would say that the Buddha was really the father of modern psychology. And it's interesting that probably now one of the most widely used therapeutic interventions in the world, something called dialectical behavioral therapy, is absolutely based on Buddhist teachings. And what we do is we start out with what's called the First Noble Truth. So it's translated poorly, I think, into our language, but the Buddha basically said life is suffering, which sounds really depressing.
Yeah.
But actually, he was correct. It's the truth. I think a softer way of translating it for us is that life is difficult.
Okay.
And that's a fundamental truth. We're born, it's a difficult process. We live through our lives, which are challenging and full of discomfort, as well as fun things, but there's a lot of discomfort in there. We experience loss on a regular basis, loss of previous generations, our grandparents, our parents, and ultimately ourselves.
Yeah.
Most of us struggle with mortality. That's stressful. We worry about that. So that's an uncomfortable feeling we live with. And then we have to go through the process of getting old and dying, and that's not much fun for most people. It's usually an unpleasant experience and an unpleasant part of their lives. So you could argue life is suffering. I would say life is very, very challenging.
Yeah. Life is challenging.
Yeah. Now, what the Buddha then pointed out is that we add a whole nother layer of suffering on top. Because we spend our lives, as I mentioned before, pretending it's not a truth. So we spend a lot of our lives trying to make it so that it's not difficult and we don't have to experience suffering. In fact, we spend a lot of our lives trying not to die. And it really bothers people. They don't want to die and they worry about it a lot. Okay, so what we would argue is that, okay, if you can get to a place of acceptance about the truth of our existence, then you can sort of relax into it. It is what it is. So that's an important concept and helps. And if you can teach people to think that way, which you can, because it's a choice, you can decide how you think. In fact, it's the only thing you can decide what to do, because you can't change anything around. You can change. There's nothing out there, outside of here, that you can change. Nothing. You think you can. You think you can influence other people. You think you can change the way they think. You think that you can change the way the world works. Those of us who live in the hurricane belt know that that's a pretty futile concept. All right, when they come, and they do whatever they want, and we can protect ourselves as much as we like, but they're still going to come and do a lot of damage. So all the worry is an additional stress on top of something that's already stressful. So acceptance is perhaps the key. So we talk about that a lot in dialectical behavioral therapy. So there's a key point, a key part of stress management. So I talk quite a lot about that in the book and how you can manage that.
Okay.
And then finally, the fifth element in my sort of, if you want, formula or things that you need to address is what I call me time.
Me time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So most people think of me time as sort of curling up with a good book or watching a football match on Saturday with a couple of beers with friends, or maybe getting a chance to read a magazine away from your partner, family and spouse, or whatever it is that gives you pleasure. And certainly that's an important part of balancing your life. But for me time's something much more specific. It's a time of self-reflection. It's a time you set aside every day to ask yourself some very simple questions. How am I doing physically? How do I feel physically today? How am I feeling emotionally? And how am I feeling mentally? So do I have clarity of thought, or is my brain a little cloudy? In emotions, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I anxious? More anxious than normal? Have I woke up in a calm place today? Physically, what's aching? What isn't aching? So those are the three questions you need to ask about
me.
me.
Take time out to evaluate ourselves.
Yeah, to evaluate ourselves. And then the fourth question that you asked with the other three is why? So this is an important part of it, because the book, what I write about in the book is if you want to change your health, if you want to enjoy better health, you're sort of going to have to make a plan. You know, it's that age-old saying, you know, if you fail to make a plan, plan to fail. All right, and it's really important, and that's sort of infused through the book, is the whole concept of planning and how to manage that. Now, if you have a plan, and you don't sit down occasionally and check in, how do you know if the plan's working? And we're all so busy rushing through life that most of us don't find even that 5 or 10 minutes a day to sit quietly, ask those 4 questions,
That's true.
and say, so is the plan working? You know, I'm eating less carbs, or I'm going to the gym. Is it actually getting me where I want to be? Do I feel better generally? Do I feel mentally better now I'm going to the gym? And the answer is you will. Do I feel physically better? You absolutely will. Do I feel emotionally better? You will. But if you don't check in, how are you going to know? And if you don't jot that down, you'll be surprised to find how poor your memory is. So I'm very keen on people jotting little very short note diary.
Documentation is good, yeah.
Well, there's more to documentation as well, because it's a doing thing, and the way we rewire our brain is through doing things. And writing is doing, unlike thought is not a doing thing.
And you forget it anyway.
Yeah, correct. And it's chaotic. We talk about the monkey mind. So, because if you think about the way your thought processes are, we're easily distracted. So, and then we can't remember what we were thinking a few minutes ago. But when you start to write things down, not only does it help us with recollection, but it also starts to rewire the brain. And the secret to changing and being healthy is you need to change the story in your brain, because it's the one thing you can control. You can decide your story. My life is just one of suffering and it's unfair. Or how about my life is full of suffering and that's the way it is? The 2 very different approaches. And if you write that down and sort of work towards, you can see things start to change, and the way you feel and the story and the dialogue starts to change. And along with that, your body will start to change and your neuroimmune system will start to change, and again back to, if you want, helping with the strain placed on the body by life stress. So that's the 5th element: me time, self-reflection. And then you can take that a little bit further and do formal meditation and breath work, which I'm a big fan of, and that's where yoga comes in, because yoga is a process of meditation, but the meditation includes your thoughts and your breathing, as well as how do I feel physically. Yoga is not an exercise, contrary to popular belief. It's actually a meditation that encompasses me time, emotional, mental, and physical reflection during a process that's quite rigid in its structure, that allows you to go, that's how I feel when I do this. That's how I feel emotionally when I do this. And it's also based on breath work. So that's it. That's the 5 components. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I want us to go back to the diet part.
Yeah.
Because I think prior to the show we were talking about, I think give an example of eating rice. Because a lot of people, we talk about eating this balanced diet. We talk about what we shouldn't eat and what we shouldn't. What really should we be eating or should not be eating?
Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to, before we talk about that, I'm going to talk about why it's a challenge to change it. So one of the concepts that's really important, and I talk about in the book, and it's important that people understand this. Our neuroimmune system, so the nerves in our body and our immune system, are laid down and wired, if you want, hardwired. By the age of 7, you can perhaps push that out to 12. So if you want, the finished product and the predictor of your life health story is done by 12. So from an ecological point of view, the environment in which you grow up has a profound effect on how that process happens, and therefore will have a profound effect on who you are as an adult, what sort of health you're going to enjoy, physical and mental health, because you cannot disconnect physical and mental health. This is a big misconception that's been around for a long time. In the Western world, not in the East, they've known it forever. So your life story is sort of predicted by what happens to you in your
So
through
your
a childhood environment.
Very critical.
It's absolutely critical. What happens to you up to the age of 12 dictates the rest of your life, pretty much. So that's a very interesting concept.
I believe that because
Yeah.
I know whatever I went through with my suffering from inferiority complex. It
Yeah.
all happened
All of it.
in my child, and
Yeah.
then up to being
Yeah.
50 years old, it's still
Yeah,
bothering me.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
still impacting me.
Because it's hardwired. So I'll come back to food in a second, because it's sort of important that people understand this sort of concept, because I think it gives people some peace. So if you grow up in an environment, if you grow up in a household that's chaotic, let's say a parent has some sort of mental health challenges, maybe somebody has an addiction problem, maybe it's just a dysfunctional family. And by the way, dysfunctional families come from prior generations being dysfunctional.
Yeah.
The sins of the fathers are visited upon their sons. All right?
That is true.
Because, so, often people come to me and they think I'm judging their parents when I say their childhood was far from perfect. And I just say, look, no, your parents grew up in a far from perfect childhood. And their parents grew up.
Yeah.
So there's no blame in here. There's no judgment. This is a very Buddhist concept, by the way. There's no judgment in Buddhism. And judgment's a big problem, I think, for mental
Even
health.
Christianity, it tells us that.
Yeah.
It goes from generation to
Yeah,
generation.
yeah, and also talks about not judging people.
Yeah.
I mean, Christ was the ultimate stop judging people and stop living by all these
Yeah.
strange and silly rules and judging other people because they don't live by your rules. It sort of got lost in the translation somewhere. But anyway, a different discussion for another time. Perhaps I would suggest that's what's happened anyway. So you're wired and laid down. So back to, okay, you grew up in this chaotic household. This produces anxiety. Yeah? So if I grew up for 7 years in that formative period of time where my neuroimmune system and my circuits are all being hardwired, laid down, and then reinforced, okay, why would it surprise anybody that I then suffer from chronic anxiety for the rest of my life? Because the anxiety circuits in my brain and in my gut were reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. Okay, so
I think it's normal.
yes, absolutely. Your brain's just programmed. It's very lazy. It will go to the easiest route. It will, nervous tissue and the immune system will always go down the biggest road if you want. It won't go. It's not very interesting going down a dirt road. It'd rather be on the highway with pavement. So if you build a beautiful paved highway, that's the way it's going to go. So another analogy would be like if you go to the gym and you do biceps exercises with weights for the next 3 months, nobody's going to be surprised you get big biceps. And you're going to be stronger in that arm than this arm where I neglected it. Okay. So I grew up in a family that's dysfunctional for whatever reason, and as a child I live in a constant state of anxiety. Well, believe me, you're going to spend the rest of your life in that state. All right, because that part of your brain is wired, it's prominent, it's like the muscle. You worked it and worked it and worked it. You absolutely can.
Overcome it though.
You can soften it.
Okay.
You can soften it. So part of it for me is teaching people, one, to understand where it came from, because that really helps people, because they think there's something wrong with them. And I go, no, it's normal.
Yeah.
If that's how you grew up, then this is normal. Like if I took you as a child like the Russians do, and I took you at 5 or 6 to a gymnastics training camp, the chances are you're going to be a pretty good gymnast, and some of you are going to become a world-class gymnast. We know that. That's the environment in which you grew up in. We program you to be a gymnast, to think like a gymnast, to have the muscles of a gymnast, to all the things. So we select you out and then we do it. So it's the same for all of us. So that's the point. Your childhood decides who you're going to be. So being anxious is normal if you grew up in an environment that makes you anxious. If some horrendous event happened, maybe you were abused as a child, very common. And sometimes abuse is abuse of neglect. By far the commonest form of abuse is actually abuse. So parents, and again, this is all non-judgmental. And there's verbal, there's physical, there's sexual, but there's absence, which is probably the commonest and the least addressed. So, people say, oh, that's, you're about to judge people again. No, there is no judgment. I'm only interested in what happens to people from a biological point of view. If mum and dad have to go out to work, both of them, so you become that sort of child that comes home from school, takes care of themselves. If they're sort of absent and they're not raising you. And if you no longer live in a village where other people can raise you, and so you come home and raise yourself in a sense, and then when mum and dad actually finally do come home, or maybe the single parent increasingly is a problem these days, they're exhausted, so they're still not available. Present, not available. Maybe even grumpy because they're exhausted.
Yeah, they're physically there.
But they're not mentally there. And so if that's the world, so you grow up in this dysfunctional sort of family, then that's going to influence you for the rest of your life. Okay, and we're all subject to this. Can you change it? If you, one, have acceptance that that happened to you, so that's the first bridge.
True.
And the second is, then what I like to do, and what I'm interested in recently, is that I think one of the most helpful forms of therapy, firstly, are doing therapies. So talk therapy helps people change the dialogue in their head, their thoughts. Very important, because you do have choice over that. But that only gets you so far. You've then got to do stuff. Writing down's a good start. Going out and acting out the different behaviors, the new behaviors you want, starts to rebuild new pathways in your brain and throughout the whole body, because I keep pointing at the brain, but it's the whole system works together. All right, so that helps, going out and doing things. Alcoholics Anonymous used to talk for years and still do about fake it to make it. All right, that starts to rewire the circuits. And then over a period of time, we can start to change the way you think about your anxiety.
Okay.
Like it becomes less of an illness, less of a problem. Like I learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And as I learn to live with it, and as I sort of, in a sense, ignore it and stop, in a sense, worrying about it, like there's something wrong with me, it starts to fade. And as you build new behavior patterns and act it out, so the new circuits, if you want the back roads, start to get paved. Yeah?
Okay.
And so it's easier to go on a back road now. And in fact, I'm more prepared to go on a back road. And in fact, if you stop using the main road, it starts to crack, grass starts to appear in it, and it's not so attractive because now I'm actually going down this newly paved back road, which is actually a better way to go than the old main road. Main road's never going to disappear. There are Roman roads throughout Europe that are 2,000 years ago they were built, and you can still see them, and in fact you can still walk down them. All right, so they're never completely gone, but they're not the main route anymore. We've built new highways. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
So that's the hope for people. And what I would say to people who have trouble with psychological challenges, which frankly we all are, every single person in my office, anybody I ever see for counseling or for medical treatment, if we talk about their childhood and we talk about their emotional challenges and their mental health challenges, everybody's got some. And even the ones that tell me they don't.
I believe that. I believe we all had some mental issues.
And since it's the neuroimmune system, and since what's going on in your brain, it's not a one-way street from the gut to the brain, it's a two-way street. The information's flowing both ways. If you're mentally distressed, then the rest of the neuroimmune system in the body is distressed, it's dysregulated, it's not going to function as well as it should do. And therefore you're more prone to cancer, more prone to infections, more prone to ill health generally. And again, you know, we could talk about the complexities of that. So it's really important to work on people's mental health as much as it is on their physical health. And so this is one of the problems with sickness services that governments have created, and the medical profession, who know nothing about health, have struggled with, because they can't understand how to fix people, because they only fix the physical manifestation of a dysregulated ecosystem, of which a very important part is how you think and feel. All
I think that's very critical.
Predicated on your childhood experience and environment.
That's good. But how do we get people to identify and accept that we need to deal with the mental aspect of our lives?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's shone upon, or when they think of mental issues, they just think of someone losing their mind or going crazy, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, people fear what they don't understand.
Okay.
So part of, I think, addressing the problem is sort of what I'm trying to do with the book, what you're trying to do here with your program, what we're all trying to do, we're all educators, and what we're trying to do is get people to, if you want, open their mind to new ways of thinking.
Yes.
All right. So your parents weren't always correct, and their grandparents weren't always correct, because thinking has evolved. My dad would say in a sort of helix type fashion. In fact, we always end up at the same place. There is very little new knowledge on the planet, but hopefully science has moved us forward to understanding why those old wives' tales or old laws mattered, why cultural structure matters, why childhood discipline, which apparently has gone out the window, matters. We need structure and all these things. So, going back to your question, the way I think we address the problem is that we normalize it. Firstly, everybody needs to admit they didn't have an ideal childhood, and there's nothing wrong with that. The second is we need to remove judgment. So it's implicit. I mean, patients tell me all the time, you're judging. They get grumpy. They get agitated. Because you're judging my parents. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Your parents are like you. They had a far from ideal childhood, and they carried certain burdens with them, emotional burdens and intellectual burdens and even physical burdens because of that, that made their ability, if you want, to raise you in an ideal way very challenging. And we've made it worse because modern society's blown the family structure apart, and we've destroyed the village. So we just keep compounding our error upon error, and we need to sort of get back to the basics, and the sort of what I talk about in the book. It's the really fundamental basics that matter: family, community, cooperative behavior. We don't have to like each other. I mean, there are plenty of cells in the body that don't like other cells in the body. They're not friends, but they cooperate with each other. And if you look at any successful entity, it doesn't mean everybody in the entity likes each other. But if they work in a cooperative fashion, if they help each other, if they balance each other, I'm here to help you, you're here to help me, and we recognize that. I may not like you, I may not even understand you. Frankly, you've got a different, certain immune cells have very different priorities than a muscle cell. And they don't necessarily align. But everybody's got to give a bit to make it work, and it's the same in any system. So, making it normal, get rid of judgment, open the discussion, shine the light on it, and go, okay, these are real problems. We have lots of problems with abuse in this town. We have lots of problems with people who are suffering from mental distress and therefore physical distress. We have lots of challenges here, all over the world, with cultural norms about diet and about exercise and sexuality and sleeping habits. But since diet's really important, we'll go back to diet. Okay, so here there's a traditional way of eating, as there is in any other country. So let's link this back to childhood. Why do you want to eat this way? Because the circuits that were laid down in my brain were the ones that enjoyed this type of food.
So it became a culture.
It was programmed into me. Like, I find it, people say, I cannot live without rice. I crave rice. I mean, I laugh in a sense, because to me it's a completely, what a bizarre concept that you would crave rice. But if you were raised on rice twice a day from the day you were, weaned up till now, your brain, like this muscle doing its biceps, or the person growing up in the house full of anxiety-making behaviors, it's going to be, your brain's wired to crave rice. That's what it wants. And if I stop giving it to you, you get distressed. I grew up in a culture that didn't eat rice, so I don't care whether I eat rice or not.
Well, you didn't have, okay.
Rice in the UK was foreign stuff. That's what foreigners ate. So we had potatoes, Irish potatoes, and bread, big part of the UK diet. So my comfort food would be Irish potatoes or bread. So when we talk about trying to get people to change lifestyles, we then get into the whole world of trying to work against culture, which is sort of ingrained and hardwired into your brain and your neuroimmune system. And it is in your immune system because that's the food your gut grew up with. It's the food your bacterial colony grew up with. So these are no small things. The trouble is, they're not necessarily good for you in the quantities, and here's the important part, in the quantities that we currently consume them. So there's nothing wrong with peas and rice if the portion is the right portion. But if the portion's 4 times what it should be, all right, and you're truly consuming 20 cubes of sugar, nobody's going to be surprised if you become overweight.
So you're saying consuming peas and rice is like consuming 20 cubes of sugar?
A standard Turks Island serving of peas and rice is 20 cubes of sugar. That's the equivalent. As that starch goes in and is broken down in your body, as far as the body's concerned, it's just glucose. It doesn't even have fructose in it. So fructose is worse because fructose, which is what's in high fructose corn syrup, which is actually no different from table sugar, cane sugar. It's got a bad name. It's just the way it's structured. It's liquid, so that the food manufacturing industry can inject it into everything. And while we're on the sugar topic, okay, we're naturally addicted to sweet. You're born addicted to sweet. That's because our ancestors struggled to get enough energy to stay alive. And honey was a really, really good source of energy. So we've had a relationship with bees that goes back, well, we don't know, but it's probably 30,000 years and probably way before that. So again, hardwired into us, now generationally wired into us, is this craving for sweetness. So when the sugar industry figured this out, and the tobacco industry were the first people to figure it out, because they'd put it in cigarettes. That's why they went into the food industry in the end. The tobacco industry bought the food industry back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. We all crave sweet. So if we put lots of nice sweet things in front of people, they're going to buy them. That's great if I own a company selling a product and follow the money. You know, what we eat is based on profits and capitalist thinking. You know, it's all about money, not about what's good for you. It's about how much money can I make. So I'm going to sort of promote a product that you're going to crave because I put sugar in it. I'm also going to make the colour right and the texture right and the crunchiness right and all sorts of other things go into food science that make you want to buy my product. The trouble with all that is that sugar is very inflammatory. It makes you obese. It pushes up your blood pressure in its own right if you eat it. So there's so many problems with sugar. So junk food's poison, but it's yummy and we all want to eat it, and I get it. And it's cheap, which is a real problem. So now we're back to governments, because it's manufactured en masse out of ingredients that are very cheap and heavily subsidized. So certainly when I was researching the book, one of the most subsidized products in the United States in the agricultural sector was sugar. And there was one paper I read that demonstrated that I think it was 40% of income flowing into the sugar industry came from federal subsidies.
Wow.
So the federal government, through taxes from people, are actually financing the production of a product that is deadly poisonous to human beings and consumed in insane amounts. Like 100 pounds of sugar a year is consumed in North America per head. That's the average consumption. 1840, it was 7 pounds a year. Traditional peoples around the world, Africa where I am, it's probably about the right number, maybe 10, 15 pounds a year, possibly.
That's why they're living longer than us.
It is why they live longer than us. Yeah, it is why. And the more affluent people become, it's really obvious in Africa when I'm there. The more affluent people are, the more overweight they are, and then they start to develop high blood pressure and diabetes and all the diseases. But when I see people who live a more traditional lifestyle in the village, they don't have any of the diseases. They don't have cancer. The only way that Africa can operate, like in Malawi where I am, and return to and start to do some projects there. So 600 doctors, 20 million people, probably about 3,000 clinical assistants. So how can you manage a population like that if you have so few medical professionals? And the answer is you don't need the medical professionals because most of the population live a very, very simple life. They walk everywhere. They eat just enough food.
So they're healthy.
They sleep, double sleep, 2 sleeps. They have stress, but they live in communities. So they still have that community family structure.
That's
It's a very structured system, very, very structured indeed. And that's how they are, they're healthier. And then when you start to see people move up, so-called advance economically, you start to see the ill health appear. It's really interesting.
Wow.
So there's a balance, and all I'm trying to promote in the book is, little things. Let's try and get back to bring some balance back into your life. Understand how all that, how these things all interact. So exercise changing your immune system, movement changing your immune system, food changing your immune system, sleeping changing your immune system. And since your neuroimmune system is the government of your body, it's what runs you. All right, you want it to be in balance, you want it to be healthy, and you want it to be working in a cooperative fashion with all the other systems in the body. All right, and so that's how you do it. You balance it out.
That's amazing. Wow, this has been a very, very, very informative show. I mean, every time I do a health thing, I say I'm going to try and avoid this rice. But now that you gave me the equivalent of 10 cubes of sugar? 15
Oh, no,
cubes?
keep going. 15.
15
Around here, or the servings I see, some of these, some people
to,
eating it's 20 and more.
I got to do better. So you've convinced me. I have to do better, and it's about discipline. And
well, but if you understand what the problem is,
yes.
Okay, so stop beating yourself up when I say to patients, stop giving yourself a hard time when you can't do it. This is literally hardwired into your brain.
Yes. It ain't gonna happen overnight.
No, and so stop giving yourself a hard time. And so doctors and healthcare people, you've got to cut out all these things. And I go, well, no, we have to change this. There's a slow, exactly, because it's literally programmed into you like the program in your computer to start it.
Absolutely.
And so you've got to, once you understand that, then you can start to rewrite alternative programs. So that's what the book's about, and it shows you how to do it, and it talks about how to do it. So I hope it helps people, because I think it will. All the things we've talked about today in a little bit more depth, and it's not written in such a way you can't understand it. I spent a lot of time with editors turning it into a book that anybody could read. Yeah. Because
the book is available on Amazon.
So currently, you can access the introduction and the first chapter by going to the website, which is www.thebodycooperative.org rather than .com. If you sign up right now, we'll send you the introduction and the first chapter. You give us your email, we'll send you a reminder that on the 13th of September, you can go to Amazon. You can buy an ebook for 99 cents on the 13th, and that'll be good for about a week. The hard copy and the paperback will be there. And then finally, I've recorded the book. So it's an audio book, and I've actually asked a man and a woman to read it. So there are actually two versions. You'll be able to buy a female voice or a male voice, because some people find a female voice easier to listen to, and some people find a male voice. So I've given people that option.
Nice.
Yes, and I'm also a big believer in equality. So I think I want to make it available to people in whatever format is easiest for them to consume. So that's it. That's what it's all about, and I hope it starts a bit of debate.
I think it will.
And I hope for individuals it will give them a bit of a roadmap. And there's some new concepts in there. There's no question, but it's all based in science. I haven't put the science in. I did not make it a referenced book like some people write books and then it's all referenced. I mean, there are thousands of papers that I've read in behind that. Anybody can challenge me on any sentence in the book, and I'll produce the scientific data to support it. The blog on the website hopefully will fill in the gaps, because I actually wrote over 200,000 words and edited them down to 58,000. So there's 150,000 other words that I will slowly put out the blog site, and then I hope people enjoy it. And then there's some podcasts up on there and some chats like this on the website too. So yeah.
Wow. Well, any closing remarks before we end?
I think firstly I would say thank you. Thank you to those who are listening and taking your time out, because time is valuable these days. I would just suggest to people that it's about balance. It's about gradual change. No journey is made without the first step, and every journey is 1,000,000 steps, or 1,000, or 100, or 5. It doesn't matter. So if you just keep walking in the right direction, you'll get there. So a lot of people are like, I can't do this, I can't change my life. And yeah, you can, but you just need to take little steps and just keep walking in the right direction. And one day you wake up and you realize you got to where you're trying to go. The only other thing I would suggest to people is that one of the biggest problems in life, in my opinion, is judgment and expectations.
Yeah.
So stop expecting things to be the way you want them to be and accept life as it is, and stop judging other people for not being the same as you. Maybe you should spend some time trying to find out a little bit more about them. And when you do that, you'll be surprised to find that they're exactly the same, because I travel all over the world, and the one thing I can tell you, I don't care what sitting room I'm in, what clinic I'm in, everybody's the same.
That's it.
Everybody. I don't care what color, religion, creed, or your sexuality. Everybody on this planet is a human being,
Yes.
and they all have exactly the same worries and fears and wishes and desires. And that's absolutely, so if we could just stop beating on each other and behave in a more cooperative fashion towards each other, and be brothers and sisters to each other, we can probably live better lives, we can reduce some of our stresses, and the planet needs it, because frankly, if we don't do this, our kids aren't going to have a future, period. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some good points you ended up the show on, because I tell you, if we stop judging people, I believe there'll be less crimes in this
Yeah,
world.
for sure.
There'll be less hatred in this world.
Yeah.
There'll be less jealousy in this world, and we'll love to live I think we'll learn to live in harmony with each other.
Yeah, we can.
You know?
We're not different. I mean, one of the greatest sadnesses to me is that there's this complete artificial belief that because you're a black man and I'm a white man, we're different.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the...
It's absolute, it's
very sad.
madness, because
It's
I can tell you from a biological point of view, it's absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
It's
rubbish.
It's literally rubbish. It's ignorance, actually.
It is. It is ignorance.
It's literally ignorance.
That's why I cannot comprehend this.
I can't either.
I cannot comprehend this race thing.
No.
I know it exists, but I just can't comprehend it.
No, I can't comprehend it either. I find it deeply offensive, actually, from a biological point of view, as a physician, as a person, as just a human being in the world. I find it deeply offensive, because it's what creates so many problems. And like I say, I'm going to say it again. I've sat in living rooms and with people who are ill and well over this entire planet. And the one thing I can tell you is that we're all the same. I hear the same stories, the same emotions, the same fears. It's never different. Never.
Yeah.
There's cultural overlay. That's a different discussion. There are cultural norms. Different discussion. But when we get down beneath all of that and we sweep it all away, and which I'm privileged to do as a physician, when I get into that quiet space with that person, one-on-one like this, I go, oh, you're just like everybody else.
Wow.
And I don't care whether you're a terrorist in Sudan or a pirate in Sudan, or whether you're a Buddhist monk on the top of a monastery. It's the same. In the top of a mountain monastery. It's the same stuff. We're all humans. If that's the one thing that people will get from this discussion today, please reflect on that and think about it.
Yeah.
You'll be a happier person.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. We've been watching the Drexel SEMA show. I encourage you to purchase the book, The Body Cooperative, which will be on Amazon. And I want, as Dr. Slattery mentioned, what impacts us. Our diet, we need to exercise. We primarily recommend walking. We need sleep. Strain is impacting us. What's the fifth one I'm missing, Doc?
Yeah, and then just spend some time self-reflecting.
Me time.
And me time. Just make some space in your day to sit quietly by yourself and how am I doing? And what do I need to change? And is the plan to change working?
Yeah. And all of these things, I agree with Dr. Slattery, and I believe it can impact us. If we follow these, if we understand these 5 elements, we wouldn't have our health situation would be alleviated. And we wouldn't have to be spending all our time going to the medical doctors, even though Dr. Slattery is a medical doctor. We wouldn't have to spend all the time going to his office. Because the key thing is, if we prevent ourselves from becoming sick, that's the most important thing. If you're already sick, it's a different story. But even if you're already sick, you can still get better.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So I encourage you to purchase the book, and Dr. Slattery, I really appreciate his time.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure.
Being on the show and sharing this book with us, and sharing more than the book with us, other means of living life as well. You share with us on the book. but stop judging people, appreciate people who they are. I love that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You've been watching the Drexel SEMA Show. Rise up and take your position.